a time as a child, I would say peanut butter and jelly for sure. Has to be grape jelly. And I'd like creamy peanut butter, not crunchy peanut butter. Bread, not too picky about. I would even eat the crust. But peanut butter and jelly. For a while when I was a child, bologna sandwiches of all things. I don't know that I really eat any sandwiches anymore. I eat wraps, which are a type of sandwich, often like a grilled chicken Caesar wrap, a certain variety of sandwich. What's your favorite sandwich? What has been something that would take you back? Did you have a certain sandwich you ate as a child? Do you have a favorite sandwich now? Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to Preparing for Sunday, where you and I take a look together at the upcoming Sundays, Scripture, the lectionary, the Gospel text for Sunday, September 22nd, 2024. This for us is the 18th Sunday after Pentecost, a year B. All of those are code words to find ourselves on the calendar for the church, as opposed to the calendar that we all have on our phones or hanging up or whatever. The text for this week is from the 9th chapter of Mark. It is Mark 9:30 through 37. And I believe from here we're going to be pretty sequential for a while. I think the readings go right in a row now for a few weeks at least. But I want to do some time with you here where I sort of talk to you about the background of this particular scripture text. How about I read it for you, and then I'll talk some about it. It's Mark chapter 9. It's verses 30 through 37. They went on from there, so talking about Jesus and the disciples, they went on from there and passed through Galilee. He did not want anyone to know it, so that he is Jesus. Jesus did not want anyone to know it, for he was teaching his disciples, saying to them, "The Son of Man is to be betrayed into human hands, and they will kill him, and 3 days after being killed, he will rise again." But they did not understand what he was saying, and were afraid to ask him. Then they came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they were silent, for on the way they had argued with one another who was the greatest. He sat down and called the 12, and said to them, "Whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all." Then he took a little child and put it among them. And taking it in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me." All right, so that's the gospel for this upcoming Sunday. The gospel which I'm preparing together with you now by talking about it, and which I will dive into some background of. Primary here is that this is the second of 3 passion predictions that Jesus gives in the Gospel of Mark. And this sandwich, Jesus serves it the same way every time. Or I could say Mark serves it the same way every time. There's 3 passion predictions, and they follow the exact same process. I told you that I liked grape jelly, creamy, probably Jif, I guess, on usually white bread. When I was a kid, I loved that sandwich. Jesus serves this sandwich. Mark tells us about the making of this sandwich, 3 predictions of his death, and it happens the same way every time, which is, how you know the sandwich is great, I guess. It's the passion prediction. This happens in chapter 8 and chapter 9 and in chapter 10 of Mark. Immediately following the passion prediction, you get a misunderstanding. Whoever hears it, the disciples, in this case, it's not understood. So there's you get out your white bread, that's the passion prediction. The misunderstanding is gotta have that grape jelly, always there, always on there. And then after the misunderstanding, Jesus instructs the people who misunderstood. That's I gotta put on that peanut butter. There's probably even a technique to how I always put jelly on one piece of bread first, and then peanut butter on the other piece of bread second, to wipe the knife there on the sort of crust size of the bread, put it together. That's the bread, that's the sandwich here. Passion, prediction, misunderstanding, and then instruction. It happens in chapter 8, beginning in the 23rd verse. It happens in chapter 9, beginning here with the 30th verse, which is what I just read. And it happens in chapter 10, beginning with the 32nd verse. We're going to get to that sandwich of the third prediction in about a month from now. I think it's October 20th, because we're going to now go sequentially. But we're going to get to that third passion prediction. Last week we had the first one, we jumped to this one, and that's the sandwich we're being served here, are these passion predictions, all right? And they come in the same format every time. They're in Mark, 3 of them, and they're the same sandwich every time. If you like same things, there you go. If you like new things, I don't know what to tell you, because this is the way Mark does it. Inside of this text, there's some things I'll stop to talk about. In this point, he feels like this is a teaching for his disciples only. Sometimes he has the crowds around him, and it's more of a general population teaching that maybe goes to one group of people. This one is just for the disciples. The scripture goes to great length to tell us almost every time before Jesus teaches who the audience is. Sermon on the Mount, big crowds are gathered around. In this one, it's just the disciples. And so this is a lesson about discipleship. It's the second passion prediction. We got the first one last week. The first one last week had that deny yourself and take up your cross and follow me. I tried to talk about in the sermon how flat out that is. It really means deny yourself. This one is the same sandwich, only it gives a better example of what it might look like to deny ourselves. And I guess it's a hard sandwich to swallow, this denying ourselves. We live in a world where someone campaigning wants everyone to know. Turn on your TV, turn on your radio, drive down the street, billboards and all that. You know who's campaigning. They want their name everywhere. Jesus wants his name nowhere, so he's not campaigning. What he wants is he wants the power of the message, the changed lives themselves, to be the significant thing. People who are campaigning for an office want the thing to be them. They want the power. And so this is the world's worst campaign here, where Jesus is literally, because the sandwich is the same with every prediction, he's literally giving you the same sandwich to swallow. But it's maybe, maybe got some little nuanced differences inside of it. Because here's Jesus, doesn't want anyone to know who he is. But it's that deny yourself field again, same sandwich, right? The thing about in verse 32 that they did not understand what he was saying. Verse 32 is a big one here for me. Didn't understand what he was saying and were afraid to ask him. And I'll talk about that not understanding first. The Greek word here is the only time in Mark this word appears. The disciples misunderstand throughout Mark. The misunderstanding actually gets worse as the story goes. They don't understand is content to all these stories. And so it's been translated for us here, but Mark uses a very nuanced word. It's the same sandwich, but the nuance is a little different. It's maybe not Smucker's, maybe it's Welch's grape jelly. I mean, the nuance is really different, a little minute here. But do not understand is the Greek word agnoio, which if you're a religious person, you might hear that root of agnostic, not for sure. They weren't for sure. Someone who's agnostic is not sure whether God exists or not. They're not sure about what he's saying. It doesn't say what are they not sure about? Are they not sure about him? I don't think that's true. I think they're pretty confident now that this is a significant person who they want to be invested in. Are they not sure that they want to do the thing Jesus is saying? That's pretty likely. I mean, none of us want to deny ourselves. No politician. We all want to be our name in the headlining spot. We all want to be known. We all want a legacy, and denying ourselves moves in the opposite direction. Incidentally, I do not have the sermon all the way together currently. I'm going to drop a little hint right here in the middle of this preparing for you to maybe pick up on uh, that denying self, knowing, not knowing, and then the context of being in the middle of an election, and then this whole sort of sometimes more political book than we think has sort of inspired me to be a thing that you're not going to maybe thoroughly enjoy. I'm going to be a little bit more direct about our politics Sunday. So, if that doesn't get you to church, that might keep you home. You might not like that sandwich, but that's where I think the sermon's headed. But anyway, they did not understand. They did not know. They did not know about what he was saying. They didn't know how to deny themselves. They didn't know whether they wanted to deny themselves. Some nuance there. And then it says they were afraid to ask. And this afraid is an enormously important idea in Mark. It's part of the sandwich that comes in almost every single one of these lectionary readings. And, preparing, you've read through the gospel, maybe you've picked up on this. There's a lot of fear. When Jesus walks out to the disciples in the boat, they're fearful. When Jesus says he's going to have to die, they're fearful. They're fearful because they've hitched themselves to this wagon. They're starting to say he's the Messiah, which has this political undertone. And if he's going to die, then maybe I'm in trouble. There's some fear here. And fear in the Gospel of Mark is part of the sandwich of these lectionaries every time it's handed to us. I mean, if you like a good ham sandwich, this is the same ham that comes in these stories time and time again, that the disciples are fearful. When it's talking about the disciples, when we hear those stories, you and I, as ongoing people of faith, we're not the crowds. We're not the people who aren't connected or maybe are. We're the people who God is working on. We gather for worship week after week. We gather for these videos. We're the disciples. And for them to not understand, are they not sure they want to do it? Later on in this text, it says he asked them what they were talking about, and it says they were silent. It doesn't mean, to me, that's not talking about they don't understand. That's saying that they don't know what they want to do with it. They don't know if they really want to put their neck on the line like Jesus is talking. This denying self sandwich is not pleasant. It's not a good pill to swallow. And so people are wrestling with it. The disciples are wrestling with it. And why I love Mark is probably my favorite gospel, is because that's really realistic. We hear the gospel, if any want to follow me, they would deny themselves. It's the same thing here. We hear the gospel continually, but man, we keep coming back. We're part of a congregation. We believe in Jesus. We believe in Jesus' work in our lives. We believe he saves us, but we're not really sure we want to do what he says. I talked about this last week where people always say, well, he doesn't really mean take up your cross. He means it. And this is the worst marketing point for Lutherans, for me. Most churches have taken out talking about it this way because to talk about it this way, they can't figure out any way to market it. Jesus is the worst marketer of all time. He's not trying to market himself at all because he believes the truth is so true that he doesn't have to market it. And that's why he doesn't have to share that. He doesn't want to tell people all this. He thinks it's just going to become so obvious that they have no choice. It's not marketable. It's not good for me to stand up in front of a congregation, in front of St. Stephen, and I won't keep my job for long, frankly, if I preach the gospel the way Jesus does, because he literally means deny yourself. Deny yourself means don't accrue as much money as we've accrued. It means don't think of yourself first, ever. And we can't do that successfully. We're sinful people. This is why we go back to God week after week with confession. Why deny yourself? Why take up your cross? Because this is when you're sort of hungry and going to God, and God knows that God has this sandwich to give you. All the time what we're doing is we're snacking and never getting our fill. We keep going back for the empty calories, Jesus has this beautiful pogi, or this beautiful hero, or this beautiful sandwich for us. And it's the sandwich of salvation and depth, and it would keep us, but like we can't sort of get to it all the way. We don't like the idea that Jesus makes it and gives it to us. And so we have to constantly be like, well, I'll snack. I'll just settle for, bologna, which may or may not be my favorite anymore, instead of this beautiful thing God's going to hand me. And because we want to believe that it's about our campaigning, our marketing, our getting ourselves somewhere. This denying ourselves is not pretty. Politically, we do not want to deny ourselves. We want to tell everybody how to fix the world. And so there we go again, that crux of that sermon Sunday, and how I'm sort of bouncing all around right on that. This word in Mark of fear is phobia based. It's the Greek is phobemai, phobomia, and that Greek has that root phobia in it. This in Mark is the opposite of faith. You all know by this point that I love to read. I love the book of Dune. I just love the story. There's recent movies about it that are reasonable. In Dune, one of the sayings is fear is the mind killer. And that sort of fits Mark, sort of fits. That fear is the word killer. Fear is the opposite of faith. We get afraid, and because we get emotional and afraid, we don't let God save us. We try to save ourselves, and our salvation of ourselves is inadequate, but we settle there time and time again because we're afraid. Mark sets the sandwich down as like two pieces of bread. It's faith or it's fear, and that one's the moldy one, and we pick it all the time because we just don't quite want to wait for the other one to be given to us. We want to believe that we can take care of ourselves. So this striking at our pride, at our inability to ever take up the cross, our inability to ever really be who God wants us to be. We get this sort of section in all these predictions of his passion. We get this idea of God, things that are divine and things that are earthly. We settle for the earthly sandwich instead of the divine one. The real trick of God is that the sandwiches, whatever sandwich you would name as your most favorite sandwich, is an earthbound enjoyment that you have. That's a gift to you from God. We just don't like to believe it's God who bakes, creates, chefs, makes, gives us these sandwiches. We just would rather do all those things ourselves, and then we're settling for earthly things, right? When Jesus says, "What were you talking about on the way?" and they were silent, they're silent because they're fearful. They know that what they're talking about isn't really what they were supposed to be talking about. We know that. I know all the time that if I ask a question that directly goes to someone's sin, we're fearful and we're quiet. We'd rather keep our sinfulness quiet. We're really good at bragging about the things we do really well, which is not denying yourself. And then we're really bad at being forthcoming about our sinfulness. When we do these things, we're not being fully who God would invite us to be, and we aren't living into the coming kingdom that God promises us is ours and is other people's. This silence is a fear-based, I know that he's talking about denying himself. I know it sounds pretty good for Jesus to say it. I don't believe it. And so they're scared, they're silent. How easy, I can silence a whole room by saying, what was the last sin you all committed? No one wants to talk about that. I would say that to be faithful is to be honest, that, hey, I've spoken about people in ways that I shouldn't. I've treated people in ways that I shouldn't. Often those are because I'm not denying myself. I'm taking myself too seriously. I'm putting myself first. People aggravate me, and then all I can do is talk about them. See how, to be silent would be to hide from the problem. And if you don't have a problem, Jesus has nothing to fix, right? So the real thrust of this is this children piece. Mark talks about children a lot. There are 4 different sandwiches that deal with children in this book. They're in 539, 540, 541. That's one chunk where the idea of children comes up a lot. 7, 28, 30, and there is another one that comes up twice right there in chapter 7. Here in chapter 9, we're in the middle of a child discussion, one of the pockets in Mark. It's 9, 24, 36, and 37. Children are brought up, mentioned, made part of. And that's going to happen again around that third confession or prediction of his passion in chapter 10, 13, 14, 15, and 16. Jesus is going to emphasize, talk about, or Mark's going to use this word for child again. And so what's important to me here is to tell you that this is a prediction of his death. He's going to be put to death because he's going to say human effort is never enough and you need God instead. And there is no human that is better off than some other human. We're all sinful. And what he gets put to death for is by having the nerve to say, well, my disciples should deny themselves, but anyone who, even those politicians who are putting the signs on the street, should deny themselves. That's not a thing any politician ever does. Some do it better than others, but none ever deny themselves, because if they did, they wouldn't get elected. If they pointed out the things we want to be silent about, if you watch a debate, why don't they ever answer what their policies are going to be? Because they know if they answer that half the people are going to not vote for them. And so they equivocate. The debate is not about telling you what's government is going to do for you. It's about promoting self. It's not about denying self. To participate, to run for an office automatically says you are not going to be denying yourself. You're already seeking power. And so it's a zero-sum game. You and I keep putting our confidence in our voted, elected officials instead of in God. And we put our mind on earthly things. These people are after power. We know it, and then we criticize them, or we act like we want better. And there is better. We're just not willing to deny ourselves to look for it. When Jesus emphasizes this children part, it's an embodiment of physical teaching of what denying self looks like. A child in Jesus' world is not a child in our world. I used to read bedtime stories to my kids. I would give them baths before bed. I would talk to them. I'd visit with them. We would have dinner, prior to that together. We would spend time together. We would play in the backyard or play board games. Children in Jesus' world, people were afraid to invest in them because they often did not survive. And so they're young. They're another mouth to feed that you're not even sure if you're going to get anywhere with it. Lots of children died. They're not able to carry their own weight, so they're a strain on the family that already maybe has to work every minute of the day to get through the day. Children are not emphasized like they are in our culture. In our culture, for a child to be in your midst, we all fawn over it, like, look how cute, and we all want to be young again, and youth and young and marketing. And Jesus is pulling, when a child is pulled in front of them, it's offensive that he is pulling dead weight and saying, this is more important in my kingdom than you, who are not dead weight. You're adults and you've been following me, but you've been arguing, you're fearful, you're silent. What he's doing here is showing an example of the extreme of insignificance. When you woke up today, did you think you were going to try to be insignificant? No, I don't ever try to be insignificant. Either do you. Either does anybody go running for any office or working in any office or any student. We all want to be significant. And this is about insignificance. We're fearful of insignificance, so we do not want it. And we don't hear that our salvation is from dependence on God. We have to be insignificant to be dependent. We don't like any of this. It offends us. We don't like this sandwich. It's like, I'm not a big liver fan, and it's like I don't really eat white bread right now. So it'd be like somebody slapping a piece of liver in between a bunch of white bread and being like, here's the sandwich and it's salvation, and if you don't eat it, we don't like it. I mean, it's just not what we expected. It's not what the disciples expect. Um, I guess the point there would be um, the power today is not necessarily in what happens right. The power for you today and the power for me is where insignificance, where am I feeling like I didn't do the job well enough? Well, that's the place where God reminds me that I'm not held guilty. Jesus loves me and provides and dies for me. It's attacking our brokenness instead of trying to build up on our here's how good we are things. To bring a child into their midst is to say, this thing that might not even live is worth my time more than you are. It's really an embodiment of a really rude demonstration to the disciples, and it's hard for us to hear. Why do we need to deny ourselves? Well, maybe I'll go so far as to say, though life is going to deny us anyway, we're going to have moments today where we feel insignificant. Those can be the holiest things if we take the meat of this sandwich and we say, the meat is the insignificance, and it's knowing that out of my insignificance can come God's greatness. Am I willing to let this be about God's greatness instead of my insignificance? God, are you willing to give me peace and to help me feel less guilty and attacking of myself in the place where I feel insignificant? Are you willing to help me be the resurrected one and to let this be about your work in the world, let others see it? It's not a campaign that I'm on, and it's certainly a tough sandwich to swallow, but that's the sandwich we're handed in Mark. It's the same sandwich every time the passion prediction comes, and it may not even really be our most favorite thing right now, but it's the sandwich of our salvation. It's the one God hands us, and this is a rundown. This has been a rundown of this text of Mark 9:30 through 37, and it sort of introduces some of the themes in a way that I won't introduce Sunday, but that I will play with in an ongoing way on Sunday. The reason why I do the preparing for Sundays is to give some meat and bones and real substance to the sandwich you're about to have. On Sunday, often what we have is a gathering that's more the crowds. We maybe have a gathering now that's a little bit more the disciples. You speak in front of the crowds differently than you speak to the disciples. It's a different sandwich that you're giving. At the bottom, though, the meat's the same. The meat is, will we know, will we believe, will we hear that this is the way God works? Not in always the most beautiful, clear, power-driven, put-together way, but in the way that says our insignificance is not enough for God to stop loving, caring, or being present for us. And if you're willing to hear that our insignificance is important because it proves our need for God, then you've heard the gospel. So I'm going to work with some of these themes Sunday. I'm not quite sure what the sermon's going to look like yet, but be prepared. I might say some things about some famous politicians that you aren't prepared to hear about or don't even like hearing about, because it's not really about what we like, it's about what we need, and what we need is saved. And if you want saved, God has to do a little work on us to get us from there to here. So thanks for joining me. This has been a look at the 18th Sunday after Pentecost, the 9th chapter of Mark, and I hope you picked up on some stuff inside that text that you wouldn't have noticed otherwise. I hope as well that you stay safe, and I'm looking forward to seeing you soon.